Dr. Tracy Page, and welcome to Health Made Easy, where we discuss topics focused on hormonal health, weight loss, and wellness. Yes, you heard me. I want to make being healthier easier. Don't get me wrong, we all have to do the work, myself included, but let's make being healthy less complicated. I'll provide clear, simple, and actionable steps that you can implement into your daily life. Really, who doesn't want to feel better? If you're ready to increase your energy, optimize your well-being, and restore your health, then listen up. I love helping my patients and listeners optimize their health and clear away the brain fog, shed the excess weight, improve their mood, and really change the way they age. I am a triple board certified physician, and I created Health Made Easy just for you. Let's get started on today's topic. Hi, welcome to episode number 7. Today I want to talk to you about intermittent fasting, the gift you didn't know you needed. And this is coming out in January, so I'm sure that through the holidays you got lots of gifts, but you may not have gotten the gift of intermittent fasting. So I want to talk to you about how you can give this gift to yourself and how it really can change your ability to lose weight, to have energy, to have clear thoughts, to reverse aging. And I don't say that term lightly because there's really a few things that reverse aging, but I have to say that intermittent fasting, we have looked at it in the cellular level, and we do know that it changes things from the cellular standpoint that does affect how you age. In fact, there was an article done in 2019 in December, and it was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. So anyone who follows science knows that that's a very reputable journal. And the article was Effects of Intermittent Fasting on Health, Aging, and Disease. And I have referenced this article actually in a short video I did on my Facebook page when I was talking about time-restricted eating and intermittent fasting, because this article is pretty profound in the sense that they have looked at the cellular level, and what they've noticed is that there's an increase in ATP, which is our energy production. There's an increase in mitochondrial biogenesis, which that means you just make more mitochondria, which are the powerhouses for your cells. You increase autophagy, and we'll talk about that. It's when your damaged cells are removed, which is great for preventing any type of disease. And it also improves performance as far as stress resistance in the cell. We call that hormesis. And basically, you put a little stress on the cell gets stronger, it learns to handle the stress, and the cell becomes more efficient. And then also you get increased BDNF signaling, and that is in the brain, so brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And this is so important because it helps the brain function, it helps you to have clear thought, it helps you to make neuronal pathways that I talked about in one of my other podcasts. So let's talk about intermittent fasting because it really is a great tool. And then I'll come back and talk to you about how you can implement it in your daily life, what it looks like, and how it can benefit you. So when I talk about intermittent fasting, there are so many beneficial effects to help you reach your weight loss goal. So the first thing people think about when they think about fasting, it's, I'm going to lose weight. And that's true. I mean, if you are eating less calories than your body needs and you're moving, you're going to lose some body fat and you're going to lose some muscle. I mean, it's inevitable that you lose both, but the research shows that you'll lose a lot more body fat than you will muscle if you incorporate both dietary changes and movement and exercise. And I think of lifting weights and doing some cardiovascular exercise. So why is intermittent fasting such an important topic? Well, if you look at the endocrine science, and that's where you expect your doctor to look, and so I look there, the endocrine science looks at and tells us that if we eat every 3 or 4 hours, actually it sets us up for not only exhaustion and premature aging, but it also produces less fat burning. Yes, less fat burning. So if you're like me, you grew up in the age when we were told to eat no fat. We were told to eat every 3 or 4 hours to keep our blood sugar even. We were told a lot of different things. And now we've researched it and we have found that when you do eat every 3 or 4 hours, it actually does set you up for not only exhaustion because of the changes in blood sugar, but also premature aging. What happens is when we eat, we begin a process of digestion, and it can take up to 6 hours. And that's really what our body requires. And our body expends a lot of energy and time to break down the food that we put into our body, into our stomach. And our body breaks it down into molecules that can be then absorbed and utilized. And we call that glucose. And during this process of digestion, a storage hormone called insulin that's secreted from our pancreas is kind of like that transporter that helps that glucose get into the cell to make ATP that I talked about, energy. Okay. And this whole process can last anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. So, 6 up to 8 hours post eating, it takes time for us to digest the food, break it down, move it into the cells using insulin. And this is really important. A lot of people don't know this, but insulin's job is actually to store fat. So I just told you that it's a fat storage hormone. So we don't really want a lot of that being produced all the time because if its job is to store fat, then basically every time you eat, every 3 to 4 hours, you're releasing insulin and therefore you're storing fat. And I see this a lot in patients. They'll come in and they'll be like, oh, I'm hardly eating. I'm eating small meals every day and I'm not losing weight. And they may have become what's called insulin resistant and they don't even know that. And so even though they're doing everything that they think is right, they're still not getting to their weight loss goal. So I want to talk to you about a little bit more about what happens when we eat. So when we consume like addictive foods, and in one of my podcasts, I talked about Dots chewy candy that's high in corn syrup. When we eat food that's high in sugar or corn syrup, for that matter of fact, um, or any type of simple carbohydrate. So we're not talking vegetables and fruit that has fiber. We're talking breads and pastas and sugar and dot candy and things like that. Our brain signals our body that it's still hungry and we are driven to eat more food. And when that happens, our insulin levels go up. So it's not only how often you're eating, but it's also what you're eating that determines whether or not you release a lot of insulin. And it's really hard to stop eating these foods once you start. I think I talked about that as well, because you get that reward hormone called dopamine in our brain. And that makes the food highly addictive and really craving. You start craving it. And then we're tired, we're stressed, we're bored. We go to these foods to eat. And your eating becomes more of driven by food because you ate the food. It creates that craving in you because of dopamine. And then you want more of it. So when you start doing that, you're driven by the food itself instead of being driven by hunger that we should feel when it's time to eat. Okay. When our stomach growls and tells us, okay, I need some food. So, and a lot of us have experienced this. You'll eat some candy. And I think I talked about it again in my previous podcast. I would eat it and I'd want more of it. And then before you know it, all of it would be gone and I'd still want it because it released that dopamine in the brain. So, the more insulin we produce, the more fat storage on our body, the more time your body spends digesting, the less time it's able to devote to things like anti aging, regeneration. And I think of things like cellular repair, autophagy, which I mentioned earlier, which is when we take damaged cells and we remove them from the cell because they're no longer useful. Our bodies can be spending time doing antioxidant production. One of our major antioxidants is glutathione. Cognitive brain health. So I told you about DNF. And so we'll make less of that if we're spending all our time digesting. And also hormone balancing and decreasing inflammation. So what's interesting is that we can develop what's called insulin resistance. So if you are producing insulin all the time to remove that glucose in the cell, pretty soon the cell becomes resistant to the amount of insulin that you're producing, and it takes more. So it takes more and more insulin to get the glucose into the cell. And when that happens, that causes inflammation in the body. So every disease that we know about usually is derived from inflammation. So this is setting you up then for disease. And again, remember, it's not cleaning up the cell like it's supposed to. So let's talk a little bit more about what is intermittent fasting. How can it help you to learn maybe to eat for hunger rather than to eat for the food that creates a sense of craving? All right. So intermittent fasting really is an umbrella term, and it encompasses a number of different fasting regimens. And they involve consuming really fewer calories and in some cases no calories for a predetermined period of time. And this is really important because it's predetermined. It wasn't as if you just say one day, oh, I'm going to fast. I mean, a lot of times that happens when we get busy. We just don't eat because we're busy. And so we've set ourselves up for fasting and we didn't plan it ahead of time. So that's happened to all of us. But when you do intermittent fasting correctly, you actually want to plan for it. It wants to be predetermined because I will tell you that I've seen a lot of patients in the office who don't eat and they don't lose weight. And basically, their metabolism has slowed down to nothing. And so they don't even lose any weight when they're not even planning on fasting. So it's really important that not only do you, if you decide to do this, you get on a regimen, and then also that we change it up. So often I'll see people or patients come in, and yes, sometimes they've done some fasting, it has worked for them. And then what worked for them in the beginning doesn't work for them anymore. Or what I'll see is patients will come in and they will, like I said, not be eating at all, hardly anything, and they're not losing any weight and they don't understand why. And that's usually because they're not eating enough calories or they're constantly starving themselves and their body thinks they're not going to get any food. And so therefore the metabolism shuts down and there's no weight loss. And in fact, there's usually muscle loss. Okay. So fasting practices have been around for centuries. I mean, even back to the Roman civilization, they were fasting. Kind of think of hunters and gatherers. They would go out and feast on the land, and then that didn't happen every day. Like they weren't able to kill something and eat it every day. There was berries on the trees, but they had really few opportunities to eat. So they spent extended amount of periods of time in a fasted state, yet they survived. So a lot of times if I do introduce the concept of fasting with a patient, and I usually don't start with it, but if I do introduce it, sometimes they're scared because they're so used to eating, like they think I'm going to starve. But a lot of us don't even know what it feels like to be hungry. Like we have so many conveniences in life and so much access to food and so much access to more food than our body really needs. And how I know that is we have obesity. We have people who are overweight. And the only way they become that way is because they're eating more food than their body needs. And it was a concept that was kind of hard for me to even wrap my brain around because I like to eat just like anyone. And when I first embarked on losing weight and really getting healthy, one of the most disappointing things for me was I don't need as much food as I'd like to eat. Like my body just doesn't need that much food. And that was really disappointing. And I really noticed too, the other thing I'll share is I really got in touch with what hunger really feels like. And I mean, just fast for 2 or 3 days straight and you'll know hunger. Like it's different than what we think because I used to think I was hungry, but usually it was I was just thirsty, or I was just tired and I needed more sleep. It wasn't true hunger. And so that is one of the gifts that fasting gives you is that it really teaches you about true hunger and eating for hunger, not eating just because you're bored, you're tired, you're stressed. It sounds good, it smells good. We eat for so many other reasons rather than hunger. And I'm going to also warn you that if you fast, it will bring up all those reasons. So if you're eating for boredom, it's going to come up. If you're eating for stress, it's going to come up. If you're eating for procrastination, it's going to come up. If you eat because it smells good, it's going to come up. And this is really important because so many patients, and myself included, have to really deal with how we're using food to buffer. And, I first learned this concept of buffering when I did life coach training at the Life Coach School, which is a wonderful program, because it really taught me about circumstances and thoughts and what the differences are. But it also taught me about how our thoughts create our actions. Well, first they create our feelings. Our thoughts create feelings, our feelings create actions, and then our actions create results. And I will talk more about that in the future. But when you have a thought, so the circumstance might be I'm fasting, I'm not eating for 16 hours. And the thought is I'm starving, I'm hungry, it smells good, I should be able to eat. This is hard. That's a big one. This is hard. So you start creating feelings about those thoughts. And those are just thoughts. They are not circumstances. And then you act on those thoughts and then you get a result. So keep that in mind because I'm going to revisit that in the future. So let's go back to fasting and how does it work? So the purpose of fasting is to shift your body into a metabolic state known as ketogenesis. And it's not ketones like we think of diabetic patients, type 1 diabetics who go into ketogenesis and that's bad. It just creates ketogenesis. And this is a topic a lot of people have heard about because the ketogenic diet is super popular. But this is when your body utilizes fatty acids and fatty acid derivatives, such as ketones, as its primary source of energy. So basically, think about the food that you eat can go down one of two pathways. It can go down the glycolysis, where you use glucose, think of sugar, as fuel, or it can go through another pathway where you go into ketogenesis and use fatty acids and fatty acid derivatives to provide energy. Both of them end up with ATP, which is energy in the cell. Okay. So the body's available glucose and glycogen stores first have to be used up, and you have to switch, we call it the metabolic switch, to get into ketosis. So imagine myself. So I have muscle on my body, and I have glucose and glycogen stored in that muscle. And I also have it stored in my liver. So if I wanted to get into ketosis or to use ketones as a source of fuel, I would first have to deplete that glycogen store. And I could do that by just fasting for a few days, and eventually it gets depleted. I could deplete it by exercising, because that's another way to use it up. So there's different ways, but eventually if you are not taking in carbohydrates and you're keeping, and actually I want to rephrase that, because I do intermittent fasting and I do take in carbohydrates and I still stay in ketosis or ketogenic state. So it's really, it depends on the person and how much you're exercising, how much glycogen storage you have, how much carbohydrates you use up during the day. So, and I think this is an important point, because I'm not promoting a ketogenic diet. I am promoting intermittent fasting or time restricted eating. And that's different than a ketogenic diet. So, a ketogenic diet means you basically limit your carbohydrates anywhere from 50 grams or less. And when you do intermittent fasting, I'm not promoting that. If my patient wants to eat carbohydrates during their eating window, then they do. So I think it's a really important distinction that I should make. And if you have questions, you can always ask me. So the metabolic switch occurs approximately, to going into using ketones or fatty acids for fuel, approximately 12 to 36 hours after you stop ingesting food. So if you want to get into a fatty acid state for energy, you could actually fast for 12 to 36 hours to get there. That's one way. Okay. The switch occurs sooner for those who exercise, are physically active, have low glycogen stores, they eat lower carbohydrate diets in general, or they have a fast metabolism. So again, that's why I wanted to point it out, that getting into ketosis or ketogenesis and using fatty acids for fuel can happen in a number of ways. All right. This podcast is brought to you by Orthomolecular Products, the exclusive supplement company of the Wisconsin Institute of Functional Medicine. I have chosen Orthomolecular because they are a leader and an innovator in the functional medicine space since it was founded over 31 years ago. They follow the latest science and combine the highest quality of ingredients to produce effective nutritional solutions for clinicians like myself to use with my patient. They control the entire manufacturing process, they know exactly what is in each capsule, and they offer products free of allergenic additives and preservatives. This is just one of the many reasons I decided to carry orthomolecular products in my office. You can book an appointment today to learn about how my team and our partners at Orthomolecular can help you reach your health goals when nutraceuticals are needed. You can call us at 920-968-9311 or visit us on our website at wisconsinfunctionalmed.com. It's all one word, wisconsinfunctionalmed.com. We use orthomolecular products because efficacy and your health really matter. So what are the health benefits of fasting? And I kind of alluded to them in the beginning. There are quite a few health benefits associated with it, and it's all based on scientific research. And they include weight loss and improved body composition, lower blood pressure, reduced triglycerides, LDL, cholesterol, and total cholesterol. So your cholesterol levels go down. We have improved glucose metabolism, so your ability to actually use the food that you're eating for fuel and energy improves. Okay, so kind of think about it like your car. If you get the oil change, then the fuel, the gas that you put in your car is going to be used much more efficiently than if you didn't have the oil changed. Okay, so when you start intermittent fasting, you're going to use that food for fuel much more efficiently. The other thing you have is enhanced insulin sensitivity. So your ability to move that glucose into your cells for energy improves. And this is so important because there are millions upon millions of people with type 2 diabetes. Even myself, I had elevated blood sugars, which was really surprising to me when I had my labs checked, because I consider myself a healthy eater. I consider myself someone who doesn't eat sugar all the time, despite the fact that I do eat dots, but it wasn't all the time. And so, yeah, so it was really surprising that my blood sugar was creeping up despite exercising, really just doing all the things that I thought make me a healthy individual. And this is one of the reasons I started using intermittent fasting in my life, is because my dad had type 2 diabetes. My dad has since passed away. My sister has diabetes. And I didn't want to have type 2 diabetes, but my numbers were going in that direction. And it was really kind of eye opening and a little bit scary. I mean, nobody wants chronic disease. And especially when we think we're doing things right, so so it can happen to any of us. It can happen to all of us, and sometimes genetics do play a role in this. I do always believe that you're not your genes, and you can control what's called your epigenetics and control how you age. And so I just took control and said, okay, I need to add in some of this intermittent fasting to drive down my blood sugar, to drive down my insulin level, and to get my pancreas to work better and more efficiently. So you do have improved glucose metabolism when you intermittent fast. And you also have improved insulin sensitivity. So the insulin that you do produce is much more sensitive and does a better job. Okay. And then you also have reduced fasting insulin levels on whole, like across the board, which means you have weight loss because remember, insulin's job is to store fat. So if you have lower insulin levels across the board and insulin is more efficient when it does come out, you're less likely to have weight gain. And in fact, you'll have weight loss. Okay. Because when you get into this using fatty acids for fuel, what happens is you actually tap into your fat cells because that's where all your fatty acids are. So you actually use your own fat for fuel. And I used to play this game with myself when I was fasting and I really wanted to eat. I'd be like, oh, this left thigh here, this little saddlebag here on the left thigh, it's taking care of me right now. Like it's feeding me and taking care of me. And I so appreciate it. And I'll be glad when I use all that up because when I use all that up, that fat will be gone. Now, I will tell you, you can't spot reduce. So, I mean, it was a little game I was playing with myself, but it was to remind me that I have plenty of energy on my body in the form of fat, and that fat can fuel me. And so, even though my mind was saying, hey, I need to eat, it's been 12 hours, my brain also told me, hey, wait a minute, you have plenty of energy on your body to fuel you until your fasting time is over, and then you can feed yourself. Okay. When we choose to eat during the day, we also make a positive impact to insulin levels. And I want to talk about this because I'm not really a daytime eater, but it does make a positive impact and it improves also insulin sensitivity. So, time restricted feeding protocols, a type of intermittent fasting where food is consumed at a certain part of the day, is what I typically practice and what I also encourage my patients to try. So, what that means is that I pick a time that I'm going to fast and I pick a time that I'm going to eat. All right. So I eat every day and I enjoy eating. And I should mention right now that you should have a very good relationship with food before you try any intermittent fasting. Because if you are a binge eater, if you're someone who, once you start eating, you can't stop, or if you're somebody who has anorexia or bulimia in the past, then intermittent fasting is not for you. And actually, you should work with your healthcare provider, or it may not be for you right now. And maybe eventually it will be. But I do want to mention that. So let's go back. So time restricted feeding is still a form of fasting. Okay. It's a type of fasting. And it has been shown to reduce body weight, abdominal fat, and improve insulin sensitivity, even without weight loss. So if you just said, okay, at 6 p.m. at night, I'm done eating and I won't eat again until 6 a.m. in the morning. And that means I'll only have water during that time. Even if you didn't lose any weight, you're still going to improve your insulin sensitivity. You're still going to improve your ability to reduce body fat and abdominal fat. So you do have to have a calorie restriction and you have to have increasing use of calories in order to lose weight throughout the day. And so I'm going to talk to you how that plays a role when you choose your program. Okay. So there are health benefits that you don't even see despite the changes on the scale. And that was really the point of that. Okay. The other things, health benefits that you see is a decreased oxidative damage and inflammation. So less inflammation again equals less disease, improved digestion, reduced bloating, increased mental clarity, improved and deeper sleep, and then decreased sugar cravings. And for me, it took about 10 days into my intermittent fasting regimen before I stopped craving sugar. Okay. Anyone with any health concerns can try intermittent fasting. So if you have obesity, mild to moderate weight gain, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, metabolic syndrome, which is increase in triglycerides, blood pressure, waist circumference, blood sugar, or low HDL. That's kind of what makes up metabolic syndrome if you have 3 of the 5. If you have an inflammatory condition such as osteoarthritis or rheumatoid arthritis, if you're an athlete and an everyday individual who just wants to improve your performance and want to improve your longevity, you could try fasting. And also intermittent fasting is considered safe pretty much for anyone, except for maybe if you're a type 1 diabetic, you definitely couldn't just stop eating because there's an insulin issue there and you have to be careful. Okay. So the different types of fasting. In the article that I was talking to you about from the New England Journal of Medicine, they talk about alternate day fasting, and that's when you abstain from all calorie food, so you don't eat anything for a full day, and then the next day you eat. So you do every other day. And I tried this. For me, I wasn't a big fan of not eating all day. I actually preferred doing a eating window, but I should preface that was I wasn't a big fan for doing that long term. Now, I did do it for a month, and actually, I had great body composition changes. I think I lost like 5 inches. My energy level was through the roof on the days that I fasted all day. But I did notice I had difficulty sleeping sometimes at night. And also, too, is that I was so ready to eat when my eating window did come open that felt that I didn't like that feeling. So I'm not an all or nothing kind of person. I think it's better actually to have a little bit more balance, but you could do alternate day fasting. And I know many people who have been successful. The other type of fasting is time restricted feeding, which is what I usually encourage in my patients and also what I do myself. And that means your fasting window can be anywhere from 12 hours up to even 20 hours. And I will tell you on days that I'm really super busy and working, sometimes I would go 20 hours before I'd have my first smoothie and then later have a meal because I was just so busy. But this is where you abstain from all calorie containing foods and beverages. So that means anything with sweeteners you want to get rid of. You only want to do black coffee, plain tea, or water during your fasting time. And then you would consume food anywhere from 4 to 12 hours out of the rest of that time of the day. So if I did a 12-hour fasting, then I had 12 hours to eat. If I did a 16-hour fast, then I only had 8 hours in which I would eat. And I always tell my patients when you break your fast, break it with good, healthy, nutritious foods because it's the first time you're eating after you've fasted. And fasting means, breakfast means just a break fast. So kind of think of it that way. You're breaking your fast. And when you do that, whether you do it in the afternoon or in the morning or whenever time you choose for your eating window, make sure that you do start off slow. So I always start off with a smoothie because it's easily digestible. I can put good healthy protein and greens in there and some fiber. And that's how I like to break my fast. The other types of fasting I'll just go over real quickly is early time restricted feeding. So that means that you eat during a 6 hour window in the early part of the day. So maybe you eat between the hours of 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. and then you fast the rest of the time. And I will tell you, I have switched to that. So that's the one thing also with fasting is that you really want to switch it up because your body gets very comfortable and used to whatever you're doing. So make sure that if you're getting results and you hit a plateau, then just switch it up. So I did that because before I was eating more of my calories later in the day after my work. And then I switched and I said, okay, I'm going to start eating my calories earlier in the day and then I'll fast at nighttime and then through the night. And that works really well too. But I had to switch it up. And the last one I'll talk to you about is the 5-2 diet. And basically that means that you restrict your energy intake to about 20 to 25% of your daily calorie requirements during your fasting window. And you do that 2 non-consecutive days per week. So that means you pick 2 days out of the week where you only take in 20 to 25% of your daily calorie requirements. And I can do a later podcast that tells you how to calculate what your requirements are. Okay. And then the other 5 days you eat what you would choose. Now, I always tell my patients, I think there's always room for us to eat healthy foods and there's room for us to have foods that are not as healthy. And so, keep that in mind when you're choosing your fasting window and how you want to do things because it's really important that you have balance and also too that you don't set yourself up for any type of eating disorders. So I think there's room in there for some good foods, healthy, nutritious, and then foods that maybe you might not get you to your goal, but you still enjoy eating. Okay. Now, there are some symptoms that you may notice when you start intermittent fasting. They usually happen the first and up to the third week, usually not too long after that, especially if you're doing it pretty regularly. So the first one is hunger. If you are used to eating 5 or 6 times per day, then you may have some hunger when you first start fasting, and that's totally normal. And I always encourage my patients drink a lot of water. Sometimes you can put a little Himalayan pink salt in there to help curb that appetite. And it's usually, again, worse days 3 and days 5 when you first start intermittent fasting. The other thing you may notice is cravings for food, even if you're not hungry. And that goes back to us eating for every reason other than hunger. So it really kind of exposes those situations to you and really kind of helps you learn how you've been buffering. And you have to really address that. So if you're an emotional eater, which I think I was or am at some times in my life, it really brings that up as well. Okay. Headaches may come up during that first 1 to 3 weeks of fasting, and those are usually due to dehydration. So make sure that you're getting plenty of water and probably even more water because once insulin goes down and once your blood sugar goes down, what happens is a lot of salt goes out in your urine and then water follows. So carbohydrates and insulin cause us to hold more sodium. And as soon as you start releasing that sodium, you start releasing water. So you're going to need actually more water, which is why you become dehydrated and why you may have headaches. The other things you may notice are irritability. It's normal to feel this way because your blood sugar is changing, it's going down, and you can't have your sugar fix. And so you're going to get irritable. But just power through, it gets better. And norepinephrine does kick in when you've been fasting and you start feeling amazing. So just get through it. You may feel cold because your blood is being shunted to your fat stores to help remove that fat and to help remove it to the muscle and to help it get burned into your mitochondria where we burn it for energy. So when the blood gets shunted to the fat cells, you're going to feel cold, and that's normal. You also may have decreased energy during your first week. So go easy on the exercise regimen. Don't try to keep up with what you've been doing prior to that. You may have, like I said, increased urination because glycogen, which is form of carbohydrate, holds water. So if you start peeing a lot, that's normal. And you may have constipation as well because, again, you're not getting enough fluid. So really keep that water intake high. Other things I was going to tell you is ways to deal with the initial symptoms when you're intermittent fasting. So I've told you some, but drink black coffee or tea to curb your hunger. Get plenty of sleep. You'll probably even want to sleep more. 7 to 9 hours is really a good kind of range. Satisfy your cravings during your eating window, but remember calories still count. So try not to overeat. And then if you feel cold, take a hot shower, warm tea, warm water, layer your clothes. Those are all ways to stay warm. Okay. And remember to increase your water intake. It will ward off hunger when you first start intermittent fasting. And I always go by this rule. If you start feeling hungry within 30 minutes of waking up, take in at least 12 ounces of water. And then if you feel hunger while you're in your fasting window, drink another 12 ounces or more, because what you'll realize is that a lot of times it's thirst that you're feeling and it's not really hunger. All right. And one thing I really want to stress is that it's very important to ease into intermittent fasting. So the above fasting regimens are just examples. And the best way to start, I think, anything is to start slowly. So kind of like we talked about those neuronal pathways, you want to create new pathways. So you're just creating a new pathway in your brain to tolerate intermittent fasting. So what I say is start out with only an 8 or 10 hour fasting window to begin with. And then once you can easily accomplish 10 hours, then go to 11 or 12 hours. And then you can go up to 13 or 14 hours, and then ultimately to 16 hours. The literature shows that in some people, especially in women, going over 16 hours isn't always beneficial. And I think that's patient specific. So I'm happy to talk more on that later, but I would say 16 hours is a good fasting window if you want to do intermittent fasting to help you with body composition, increased energy, increased mental focus. If you want to lose weight, if you want to clean up your cells and prevent disease, these are all the reasons why you should consider intermittent fasting. It's the gift that you didn't get that you need to give to yourself because you can change the way you age. And I will say that over and over again. You can change the way you age. I am 54, and starting next year in March, I will be 55. And I will tell you that this has changed the way I aged. And I feel younger and probably look better now in my 50s than I did in my 30s. And it's all because of how I'm living and the things that I'm doing. And I'm happy to share more of those tips and tricks with you as we move forward. So this has all been supported by the research. There are some great articles out there. I'm happy to reference them in the show notes, but I encourage you to try some intermittent fasting. Remember to give yourself a goal that you can accomplish. So don't go crazy when you first start, and then accomplish that, be successful, and then increase that goal a little bit each day or each week or each month. So again, it doesn't matter how fast you get to where you want to go. What's important is what you learn between now and when you get there. Because if you learn everything you need to learn and you make all your mistakes and you figure out how to overcome the obstacles and everything that you need to do, then when you get to your goal, you're going to be able to sustain it. And that is what's really important, is to develop habits that you can live with day in and day out. All right. I hope this podcast was helpful. If you have any questions, feedback, don't hesitate to reach out. And until next time, take care and try some intermittent fasting. Give yourself that gift. This is an important reminder. The podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a diagnosis or a prescription for care. Please consult with your healthcare practitioner before moving forward with any of the therapies or treatments discussed in today's podcast. If today's topic resonated with you and you want more information, please check out our website, wisconsinfunctionalmed.com. All one word, wisconsinfunctionalmed.com. Also, for those of you who want further assistance with weight loss, consider our online weight loss program called The Pause, which can be found under Services. We really focus on helping you reach your weight loss goals. We provide a supportive and interactive and engaging environment, which is led by me, Dr. Tracy Page, so you can get all the help you need. Remember, you can change the way you age, and I'm here to help.